Let's talk about Charles Leclerc, because he is a driver in demand at the moment, but unfortunately for him, it's not for all the right reasons. After another difficult weekend at the Miami Grand Prix, where he crashed twice, and this has led to questions being asked as to whether he's making far too many errors. Unfortunately for Charles, this is not the first time that we are all talking about the amount of mistakes he's making on track, after what happened in 2022 when he was trying to fight Red Bull and Max Verstappen for the World Championship. The high-profile errors that Charles made in 2022 ultimately led to his title aspirations collapsing as the season went on. But unlike last year, this year's Ferrari is simply not able to compete with Red Bull for the World Championship, as it is not competitive enough. So this begs the question as to why Charles is still making too many mistakes. Well, let's start by looking at those two crashes that Charles had over the Miami Grand Prix weekend. The first one happened in practice in FP2 on the Friday, and Charles made a mistake at turn 8. As he turned in, the rear of the Ferrari snapped and he went straight into the barriers. He ripped off the right hand corner of the Ferrari when he impacted the barriers, but you can almost forgive him for making this mistake, as he was quite unlucky to have lost the Ferrari in this kind of way. The second crash happened in qualifying while on his final lap in Q3, when he had a chance to put his Ferrari among the first two rows. But coming into turn 8 at high speed, he went over a bump and lost the car, going into the barrier rearward and damaging the rear wing. It was quite ironic that Charles crashed at the same place twice over the weekend, and this could be put down to what Charles admitted was a risky car setup that he had in qualifying, and this made the car difficult to drive. But this isn't the first time that the Ferrari has been difficult to drive, not just this year but in past seasons. It does seem that this year's Ferrari does have a small operating window, but when the car is working well, as we saw in Baku for instance, Charles was able to extract the maximum potential from the car. But over the years we've learned that Charles is very, very hard on himself. He is the first one to put his hands up if he has made a mistake, and he did just this after his error in qualifying in Miami.
2 days, 2 mistakes, same corner, so yeah, this is not acceptable. I'm always very harsh with myself, and today is just not good.
But I think that Leclerc's mistakes are not simply down to the fact that the Ferrari is unpredictable to drive. I think it's also a case of him overdriving the car, because he knows that Ferrari faces a performance deficit to Red Bull at this moment in time. So he feels that he needs to go on maximum attack just to beat the Red Bulls on merit. It's kind of this win or bust mentality. The only time that Leclerc has beaten the Red Bulls fair and square in 2023 was during qualifying and sprint qualifying for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, and this is when the car was performing really well. It allowed Leclerc to get everything out of the package. Whilst we saw this more often in 2022, again it was more over one lap. Look at the amount of pole positions that Leclerc claimed over the season. And again, it was during the races where Ferrari struggled to consistently perform. But then again, there were times where Ferrari and Leclerc were actually in sync. Look at the opening 3 races of the season. Leclerc won twice and finished second in the other. And again, later in the season, at the Austrian Grand Prix, when the car was working well, Leclerc won again. So if we're saying that Leclerc's mistakes are because he is overdriving the car, as the Ferrari is not as fast as the Red Bull, then this is something you could say is carried over from last year. Look at the mistakes that he made in Imola and Paul Ricard, for instance. The one at Imola was down to Leclerc pushing too hard to try and catch Sergio Perez ahead of him for second place, and he went too fast over the chicane and went into the barrier, damaged his front wing and fell down to P6. Paul Ricard was a completely different situation, where Leclerc was leading and trying to build a gap to Verstappen behind, and he went just a bit too wide at the senior corner and ran wide onto the dust, onto the white line, and went off into the barrier. Another point that I feel could be contributing to Leclerc's mistakes are possibly him channeling his frustrations at the fact that Ferrari is again not competitive this season. We know how much Leclerc wants to win a world championship. It is his main target. So the fact that Ferrari is playing catch up again to another team is not going to sit right with him. He wants to be in the best car and have the best chance to win races and win championships. But it is particularly frustrating that Leclerc is making these mistakes time and time again, because for me personally, I think he is the fastest driver on the grid over one lap. It's just a shame that he cannot seem to carry over this qualifying form into the races more often, because it does raise the question as to whether Leclerc is actually getting the most out of himself, or is he wasting the talent that he has at his disposal. I'll go back to the end of 2020 when he was teammates with Sebastian Vettel. When Vettel left Ferrari at the end of that year, they swapped helmets, and on the helmet that Vettel gave to Leclerc, he wrote that Leclerc was the most talented Formula 1 driver that he'd seen in his 15 years of the sport, and he told him not to waste it. And I do feel that this is the case sometimes, that Leclerc is wasting his talent. We know just how talented and quick he is, but he's yet to show this on a consistent basis. But on the flip side, you could say that that's down to Ferrari, since he's been at the team, not giving him a car that can perform week in, week out and sustain a championship challenge over a season. So this could mean that Charles could see his future away from Ferrari if he feels that they cannot give him a car capable of winning a world championship while he is there. His contract is up at the end of next year, but he has recently been linked with a move to Mercedes. Toto Wolff actually admitted to the media in Miami that Leclerc was someone he was keeping an eye on for the future, even if he did rule out trying to sign him in the short term. It probably is easy at this moment in time, given the problems that Ferrari has on and off the track, to say that Leclerc needs to leave them in order to fulfill his dream of being world champion. But I think you've got to give Fred Vasseur a bit of time, given it's very early days in his reign as team boss. He's currently in the process of looking at the strengths and weaknesses of the team, and I think he is a good team boss. Obviously, they do share a good relationship, given they worked together at Sauber in 2018, which was Leclerc's rookie season. But sooner rather than later, Vasseur has to convince Leclerc that Ferrari is the place to be, that there will be progression in the short term, to the point where they will return to a competitive standpoint where they're fighting for race wins and, crucially, a world championship. There can be no doubt that Ferrari is the most pressured environment in Formula One. You are not just driving for the team, you are driving for Italy. But I don't feel that Leclerc feels that kind of pressure. He is more frustrated at the fact he hasn't got a car underneath him to win races and win a world championship. That is why we are seeing these mistakes year in, year out. But nevertheless, he does need to cut down on the amount of mistakes he is making, because in the future, if he is in a position where he can fight for a world championship, people will start pointing the fingers at him rather than the car as to the reason why he is not a world champion. So what do you think? Is Charles Leclerc's crashing becoming too much of a problem? And what are the main reasons behind this? Be sure to let me know in the comments. Also, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe on this video. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.